Welcome to the latest episode of the Ansons podcast. Today I'm joined by yet another external guest in the form of Steve Downs. I'm calling Steve Downs business coach.
Thank you.
Is that how you would describe yourself these days, Steve?
I describe myself as a lot of things, Martin. But
Is that one of them?
We'll go with that, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, Steve, you've set yourself up this in your new coaching business. Are we calling it a coaching business?
It is, yeah. So I set up Downs Business Solutions in September last year, basically to help people. I focus on, I suppose, smaller businesses. So those businesses that have got their, the MD, the owner's been doing it all himself.
Managers.
Yeah, maybe has a small team around him, but perhaps don't have the skills within that small team. And yeah, I've set up my business to sort of reach out and help them and help them grow. So I position myself as somebody who can help a business grow in whatever format they want.
And my understanding, and I guess it comes from what I do for a living. I'm a solicitor. I'm now the managing director of a law firm. What I've done, there's a bit of a sort of Peter principle at stake here insofar as I got to where I got to by being a lawyer. I then find myself sometimes running a business, and that can apply for whatever the area of expertise is, from podcasting to repairing cars to you name it, right?
So I help a whole wealth of people. So they can be builders, they can be operational people in a sort of an engineering company. They can be a body coach. I'm working with a mindset business at the moment. So they're great at what they do, but they have no idea how to scale and grow their business. And that's not fair. They have ideas on how to do it, but don't know how to put it into practice.
Making the rubber hit the road is the
challenge. And you sit with somebody. The first thing I do is, what do you want to achieve? Uh-huh. How do you want to, what do you think you need to get to? Do you need more clients? Do you need more headspace? What is it you're looking to achieve? And then from that, you can put a plan together.
Almost a sort of, there's a bit of bringing them to like a psychologist's couch as part of this, is there? Or what's your process? How do you establish or diagnose what the problems are?
There's a number of ways of doing it. So the first thing I want to do is understand their business. And there are companies I've actually walked away from. I've gone, I can't help you. There's not enough in there, or you're too disorganised to actually help, which sounds a bit cliched. So the first thing I do is sit down with somebody with a range of questions that really diagnoses their business, but they do that themselves.
Yeah.
So they score their own business out of 1 to 10 in all these different areas, and that gives us an area of focus.
And when you're scoring that, are you identifying? That's helping you identify where the problems are.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're asking the owner to say, well, how do you think your leadership is? How do you think your team is? What is the talent within your business? What are you missing? How are you using software enough? Is your finances the problem? Have you got enough customers? So you go through a whole heap of questions, and that will then show us where to put the focus. And then we build a plan around that.
And when you've been doing that with different businesses, are there any trends that you have noticed that a lot of the smaller businesses are facing, and what are those?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think what I'm seeing at the moment is that there's a couple of words coming up, which is all about community. People keep telling us that they need to generate more connections. So and by connections, they are thinking, how do we collaborate with other businesses in the similar sector? How do we, if we win a project, can we share that with somebody else? That when somebody else wins it, they can share it with us. So they're looking for those connections, and don't know how to do it.
So I mean, years ago, a lot of, and it's one of the sort of themes of this podcast a little bit sometimes, is discussing how wasn't it great when everything was done down the pub, and now it isn't anymore. No. But years ago there was a lot of networking that occurred in the pub or on the golf course for certain businesses, and that is where sort of the business community would often come together. Certainly the local Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary Club were other areas where you would find businesses, perhaps some of them in your sector, some of them not, that you could collaborate with? Definitely in 2025, advent of digital and everything else, that feels a lot more atomised.
I think what's happened, and I think the COVID pandemic was a huge factor in this. It separated people. So you're not allowed to talk to people. And then these technologies came in, Zoom calls and Teams, which are always available, but nobody used them. And, I know from my own experience, I was working in a multinational business. I could be in Asia in the morning, Europe in the afternoon, and the US in the evening. It was great. But you then didn't have physical meetings. And those connections are made much better, much stronger when you actually sit with somebody and understand what they want. And what I'm seeing is people going, well, we've got a great piece of business. We're massively busy running that business. There's no time to find those connections. Can you help us? Well, I can. The way I would help is cut through all the I nearly swore on your podcast then. Cut through all the rubbish.
Yes.
And
Crap's allowed, by the way.
Okay.
If that's what you're trying to avoid saying.
Cut through all that rubbish. Work out what you need to do. Make efficiencies where you can. It gives you the headspace and the space to then go and do that collaboration, that team, that
network building.
Yeah, and that network, that community.
Well, and I know that there's a sort of line in something you're developing currently. One of the things that really has taken off post-COVID, perhaps in particular over the last 18 months, and I started using it a lot myself and our business has, but is LinkedIn. So as a sort of platform to enable businesses to do some of that networking and do it in a sort of digital format, what do you make of LinkedIn?
I love it and hate it.
Okay.
I'm tied to it because it's the social network platform today for business to business connections. So you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got all these other things my kids are on that I don't understand. Mm-hmm. Facebook's for old people, by the way, Martin. So if you're on Facebook, that's because you're old.
Yeah, I am on Facebook.
Okay, great. Me too. But LinkedIn is all about business to business connections.
Yeah.
I think it's been abused a little bit in the past with people just generating connections, and then it's been underutilized by others. So what I find from many of my clients are they might have 100, 200 connections, which sounds great, but they've never been on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's actually really powerful for finding people. So you're right. I've got a piece of software that launches. Where's the wood? Next week.
Okay.
Is the plan, which has come about from what I've learned. So when I started my own business, it was all about, great, I've been a salesperson for forever.
Yeah.
And I can close a deal. What I was not so good at or didn't enjoy was the outreach, finding new people to
It's
engage.
awkward, right?
Oh, it's just annoying.
Just going back to school discos when,
I went to an all-boys school, so let's not go down that route.
Well, did they not have school discos at the all-boys school? But, that some people are absolutely naturals at that. And we've got one at Anson's, Ian Fitzjohn, and I always say that I'm sure when Ian was like 14, he would have no problems being the person walking up to anyone to say, "Oh, my mate fancies you," or "Do you want to dance?"
I could do that.
Some people are absolutely amazing at that. I get social anxiety around some of that stuff for sure, right? And same in networking type forums too, right?
But I think LinkedIn, what you can do with LinkedIn is almost be anonymous, and that's not really what you want to be. But you can gather connections, and people will connect with you. So that's just what happens. So you can send connections out, people will connect. The key is not to be offended when they don't connect.
Okay.
And then the biggest challenge that everyone has is that messaging. I mean, we all get, if you're on LinkedIn a lot, you get lots of messages come through, "Oh, we want to sell you this." I would absolutely not advocate selling something on your first message. Your first message is all about, "Hi, this is, do you have these problems?" Because if the answer is yes, great, let's have a conversation. If the answer is no, I don't need to talk to you. And that sounds just get over it.
Yeah, you've got to be prepared to ask some of those questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I must admit, my sort of inbox, it's not called DMs in LinkedIn, is it? Perhaps it is.
My
inbox is a lot of the time, even if I was to open it now, there's about 4 different people, every morning almost,
Yep.
it seems to me. What are they trying? What's the latest thing? It's AML, which for lawyers is anti-money laundering.
Yep.
Trying to sell me some software for anti-money laundering. I'll have 3 or 4. Do you have this? Yeah, I do have a lot of sort of
Yes.
some of those going absolutely, as you say, straight for the gun. Do I want this? And sometimes I'm thinking to myself, well, no, I don't. And I don't even know who you are.
I may do, but I don't know who you, exactly. I don't know who you are. So what I've done is spent a lot of time thinking about not just how do you make those connections, also once you've made that connection, how do you make it meaningful?
Yeah.
And that comes from a little bit of psychology,
Okay.
About what people want to read. So your first line on any introduction sort of message should be essentially what's keeping you awake at night.
Yes.
So if the message comes to you, go, hi Martin, great that we can connect. Do you worry about money laundering in your business? If the answer to that question is no, you don't need to read the rest of it. But the answer is yes, then you might interact. If somebody's saying, would you like to buy this software? You're like, well, no. But if you use little key words, are you worried about this? Are you concerned about this? Does this make you frustrated? So if I think about the one of the companies I'm working with, which is a health and wellness business.
Okay.
We're not there yet, but we'll be tailoring their messages that will read, are you worried about staff absenteeism?
Okay, yeah.
Because that's the link in, isn't it? That's what's worrying the owners of the business, is the fact that people aren't there all the time. So if I'm selling accountancy software, are you worried about the amount of time it takes you to do your accounts every month? Does that worry you that you're not in the business, you're doing your accountancy software?
And presumably it works a little bit better if you have already seen some of their content on LinkedIn, and then the message follows up. There is somebody that I'm having a discussion with at the moment, is doing some training around lawyers and time recording, and I must admit that I had seen.
Yeah, I think
I'd seen his content on LinkedIn for a while, actually, maybe for 6 months or more, and then I can't remember actually. Did I reach out? Did I actually him then? But yes.
But then you become familiar. So I post on LinkedIn 3 times a week. Tomorrow's will be this podcast, just for anyone who's unaware.
Fine. And the clips don't come out until about Tuesday, by the way. So
well, it'll be next Wednesday.
Okay.
But in terms of what you're doing, it's about putting your name out there and making you familiar, so that when somebody says, "Well, actually, I am interested in this," they'll look for somebody, and your name will come up. And that's the key.
Sort of slowly building up a sort of a rapport or adding value with some of your content, but then what you're saying is getting that message, that first initial approach right is key.
That 100%. If you don't get that first message right, people will just be turned off.
So go on. Are you going to tell me what this piece? And you're fine not to, by the way. But what will the software help people do?
So the software will automate their outreach through LinkedIn.
Okay.
So you'll get access to my business partner is he's a tech genius in my mind. I don't know what he does.
Yeah.
So the software will automate your LinkedIn outreach. It will do that for you, but you'll get the added value of my support to make sure your messaging is right. If that messaging needs to change, we'll understand what your ideal customer profile looks like. So we're narrowing down the targets. So the more narrow you can make your target, the more beneficial, the more weight you'll get from what you send out.
So this does sound like sort of proper 21st century networking.
Yeah, it is, and there's. I think the initial thing is about just you want to make connections, but once you've made the connection, it's about then nurturing it and not going in for a hard sell straight away. It's just take your time, take pressure out of selling. Let the buyer buy. As you were saying before, in terms of you've been following this guy for 6 months, or you've been seeing him on 6 months, and now you're ready to buy. He doesn't need to sell to you. because you're ready to buy.
He does, by the way. But yes,
The process should be as salespeople. Sales is the only, I think, profession, and I'll call it profession, in the world that doesn't have an accreditation. So you can get accredited in purchasing, you can get accredited in soliciting and finance and all these things. You can't get a sales accreditation.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is odd, really, because in some respects it's a vital part of every single business, whatever it is in, right?
Every business leader has to do it and understand it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they'll chuck it in with marketing, but you're right. Even then, it's sales and marketing, right? And there's marketing accreditations.
Yes. Yeah.
But there isn't a
sales one.
Yeah. Royal Institute of Chartered Salesmen is just
there is an Institute of Sales Management and those sorts of things, but you can't do a training course and get letters after your name as you can with pretty much any other vocation.
Yeah, because business administration is there, but there isn't an Master of Sales. Would that be what we'd call it? MSA or something like that?
Sounds dodgy, but yeah.
Yes, it does. But
it's interesting, and one of the things I do as well is I do a bit of sales training, and I ran my first sort of module, if you like, past a purchasing friend of mine. He was the commercial director at Taylor Wimpey.
Yeah.
And I said, look, this is what I do. I talk about how buyers and sellers interact. Does this make sense? And he just started laughing, and he's like, yeah, it's exactly what we do. So when a buyer buys from you, you act all interested. You take the information the seller wants to give you, and then you disappear into the ether, and you'll come back when you're ready to buy. And this guy was just laughing, and that's exactly what I do. So what I teach and advocate is flipping that around a bit.
Go on, flipping it around. So
in what you take control. Take control of the sales process.
So you get them ready to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You try and sort of push that a little bit.
Yeah, and I have loads of little cliches that my family get really upset by.
Go on, hit me with them. Give me your top 3 cliches.
As a sales guy, you should never walk into a room and spill all your sweets on the floor.
Okay.
So if I walk in here and say, these are all the things I can do, I have no idea what it is you want to buy. I have no idea what your problem is, but I've told you all the things I can do. So imagine the scenario that you're going, well, that's great, but actually I wanted to buy a red car. You've told me you've got all these wonderful cars, all these great things they do, but I wanted to buy something red. All I needed to do was ask you a few questions up front, and that we would have teased that out. So I didn't need to sell you I've got air conditioning and I've got 4 wheels, and no one cares. You just want it to be red. So never spill all your sweets in the foyer when you get there.
So that's number 3.
That's number 3. Number 2 is number 2. Probably don't. How would I word that? Don't expect a buyer to do something you haven't said they can't do.
Okay, go on.
Okay, so if you set an agenda out with a client, go, these are all the things you're allowed to do.
Yep.
But you haven't said that you can't disappear into the ether once I've given you all the information. They're going to. You can't be angry. So don't get angry at a prospect for doing something you haven't said they can't do.
Yeah. So and to avoid that, you would
set the agenda up front.
Set the agenda, and even the sort of follow up.
Yeah.
Cool, and whatever. If they have sort of disappeared, you can then get them back.
So the question, and there's loads of stories, and I fell foul of these things myself, which is why you sort of work out what's gone wrong and why. And there's still a story that sticks in my head from only about 2 years ago, where I'd worked with this client. We were. I'd met the operations director, I'd met the managing director, I'd met the managing director's father, who was no longer part of the business. We'd presented at the end of the meeting, we're signing the contract.
Okay.
And I walked away with a big skip in my step and, went off to Costa, bought myself a Costa, phoned the boss and went, they're signing next week.
Brilliant.
Never spoke to them since.
Oh, no, what happened?
I've no idea. Genuinely no idea.
Couldn't you ring them back and say, what do I do?
I've phoned them, I've been on the doorstep, and they've just
blanked you.
Ghosted me from that moment. The error was Two things. Firstly, asking the question, why is it you're signing? Why are you signing this contract?
Yeah.
Because then you get them to validate why they're signing it.
Yeah.
And then they verbalized it. And then verbalizing something sort of means they're going to do it. The second thing I said, well, okay, you said you're going to sign the contract by Tuesday. How do you want me to react if you don't sign it by Tuesday? So what's the next step? I didn't. I just walked out of the room, skipping down the road, going, oh, I've just signed this massive deal.
Straight into Costa.
Yeah.
Interesting that Costa was your choice, though.
I like Costa.
Go on, give me, because we're not going to get to that first one where I ambushed you for your
No,
top three.
that's all right.
That's fine. We've got two good ones there. But if we're going into Costa,
Yeah.
top three things you'd purchase in Costa.
Oh, it's only ever one thing.
Oh, you only get one thing. What one?
I have a decaf skinny cappuccino.
Okay. Well, you don't like the sort of additional.
Oh no, we don't have any creams or anything like that in there.
No.
No.
And no caffeine, though, right? I mean, that kind of defeats the point.
Well, that's a story in itself, Martin. I came off caffeine a few years ago.
Okay.
I was the guy, although I've got one today, which is wonderful, by the way, which is why I'll probably be bouncing for a while. So I was the guy that would have espresso in the morning, Red Bull on the way to the office.
Oh my God.
And espressos all day. And my wife, who you know,
Yeah, I do. Was
said,
at school with?
Yeah.
Primary school?
Yeah.
And secondary school, actually, thinking about it.
And she said, you don't sleep very well at night. I was like, I'm sleeping fine. But I was tossing and turning. So I decided one weekend away, it was a Six Nations weekend, and I cut caffeine out on that Friday morning.
All right. Has that massively improved your sleep then?
Oh, she says so. I've no idea. But I had a huge headache for 3 days.
And then after that, you've just
could have been
turkey.
It could have been the Guinness. I don't know.
Well, I think they do say there's a lot of sort of science, a lot of thinking that sleep's the most important thing for your health generally, and including your mental health, and that. Stuff like such as certainly cutting back on the caffeine or not drinking caffeine after a certain time of day can massively help with that.
I think everything that I try to do these days is about making everyone's life easier. And the sleep thing is important. I know myself. You wake up some nights and you've not slept very well, and you feel a bit jaded, and it's like, how do you get over that? Well, it sounds daft. I have a little notepad next to the side of the bed. If I do wake up with something on my mind, I write it down, and then just get on with it, get over it, just go back to sleep.
Well, that means you don't have your phone next to your bed. That's a baller move itself.
I do have a phone next to my bed, but only for the alarm.
Fair enough. And you don't sort of doom scroll.
No, I have two phones.
Yeah.
One is a business phone,
yeah,
which stays downstairs, so the dog answers that during the night.
Okay, and then your other's your private one.
Private phone, yeah.
We've gone down some of the sales and networking sort of aspects of your coaching. Is there an element of with these businesses? And again, sort of speaking for a friend myself here. Time management, is that something that you're finding a lot with the businesses that you're coaching and the leaders of those businesses?
Yeah, so anyone who runs their own business, particularly if it's a small business, will be doing everything themselves. They may have a little bit of support in bookkeeping. Normally it's the first place they go.
Yeah.
They may have an admin support, but most of it they do.
The invoices and whatever.
Yeah, most of it they do themselves. And certainly in a trade industry, they're hands-on. They're doing the stuff on the tools. So when they're saying, Steve, we'd like to grow the business, but you're only going to you're being constrained by you're the person doing the work. So you need to come away from that and actually probably only pick the jobs that are profitable. Probably think about getting some support in, which is always a nervous point. You take on the right person. You take on an apprentice.
Yeah, it's a big step for any business.
And it's those sorts of things that are quite challenging. And but I'm working with somebody at the moment who is he just needs to sit down and take half a day just to really spend some time decompressing with what he's got going on, and his business will fly for sure. But he just needs to take a step back and see what he's doing and plan out and map out what he's got to do. And that's the sort of thing that I help people with, really sort of going, right, okay, this is where you're going to get to. What do you need to do to get there? And together we'll work out what that is. And, you know, I don't have the answers. I don't know a business as well as...
Well, there's different tools you can use to help you with you know, with time management. And I'm one of those people who's listened to different podcasts on that. I've had my own challenge in that regard over the years, and read the books and done all of that sort of stuff. And in some respects, actually getting on with it and trying to shut out the distractions is probably 95% of it, right?
We all do it. We all do it. I know when it's understanding. For me, it's about understanding who you are, when you're good at what you do, when you're not so good at your day. And I have a really. I used to lose my time at lunchtime. I'd sit down at lunchtime, have something to eat.
Yeah.
I'd have a bit of a dip after I've
sugar,
eaten.
crash.
So then you'd sit there with your phone, you'd scroll, you'd get Facebook out, and you start scrolling through the Facebook videos. Before you know it, you've lost an hour of your day. Oh, damn it! So I've now set up that I have a mindless task that I do. And I set it aside in the morning, every morning.
For that 2 till half past?
Yeah, whatever it is. I don't need to be able to think to do it. I don't need to be able to be creative. I don't need to have to... It's just doing something that just has to get done.
And have you passed that on to the people who your mentees, your clients?
Yeah, and I think exactly. So it is about identifying when you're good at. So if you're really, really active first thing in the morning, do something then. It's then okay to have a little bit of downtime, or if you're really creative in an evening, do a little bit then. If you want to WhatsApp me, you know, which is what I say to all my clients, if you want to WhatsApp me any time of day or night, please do. You know, I may not respond because I might be in the middle of doing something else, but if you need a conversation, you need to just bounce ideas. That's the sort of thing I offer to my...
Yeah, there to do.
That's what I'm there for.
You mentioned apprentices and hiring sort of young people to help a business grow. In terms of getting that right, what would you say is the key to doing it? Do you just get on with it, or is there something of a setup or a process that you would like your clients to go through to make sure that they do?
You're trying to throw me under the bus, aren't you? We're trying to find the right apprentice.
No, it's difficult, and I think that
it's actually hugely challenging.
It's challenging, but the payoff the other side of it is, I mean, by far the biggest satisfaction I get out of my career is people that we hire on, local people who start with us, photocopying and scanning and doing the sort of more menial jobs, who are then, senior solicitors in our practice.
Yeah.
And you know, I swell with pride when I think of some of the career journeys that we have had in Anson's over the years, and I get such great satisfaction out of it. Now, in terms of the process that we go through, we've got Matt, who's been on this podcast before, and he sort of meets with them and reviews the CVs and everything else like that. But that selection of that person is tough.
It is tough, and I'm a huge advocate of thinking about what sort of person you want to take on. CVs, it's really hard to sell yourself in a CV. I would absolutely, you have to a point, but look for the one that's different. Look for the one that's added some value. So, what would I say to any young person today looking to get a job, get an apprenticeship? Be different. Maybe put a little video clip in with your CV you send in.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea.
Just be different.
I have seen it in some job applications where companies do get you. I mean, I think people would also find this awkward in some respects, but they make you record a short video presentation.
And I think it's absolutely right. So I would, if you're employing a young person, if you're an apprentice, I would be looking for attitude. That's the first thing I'd be looking for, because the world has changed so much in terms of what the expectations are. I know when I go to visit, and I ran a couple of minutes later than I wanted to be here today. I'm the sort of person.
I didn't notice that, by the way. I didn't.
That's okay.
Parking's a challenge.
Yeah, but I'm always a person who wants to be somewhere 15 minutes early.
Okay.
But that's just the way we were created. You get there on time. Being early is the right way. Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at everything's done on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, it's about who can be the last one into the room, but on time. You'll see. You join a team.
I didn't know that was a thing.
But you join a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and people join at exactly the right time. Now, if that was in a physical meeting room, you'd be in that meeting beforehand to grab a coffee and have a few words. So I think the world has definitely changed in terms of expectations of not just the youth of today, but everybody's expectations, and that's difficult to get beyond. So what I tell anybody, if you're looking to recruit, is look for that person who is being a bit different, has got the right attitude, because you can't train attitude.
No, that's right.
And you and I both like our rugby, and I always tell my son who plays, like, look, when you're chasing back to make that covering tackle, that's not skillful. That's not skillful to race back and push as hard as you can to get there. That's attitude.
There was some coach, wasn't there? I'm sure I listened to that on a podcast recently, and they said that their mantra was that it was rugby union, but I can see how this could apply. They wanted to be sort of world class or brilliant at all the things that required no skill. Yeah. So it was running backwards and getting up quickly off the floor and all of the stuff that are sort of effort based rather than. I definitely think that's right. I mean, I think that what we would do at Anson's is and how we've responded to sort of that challenge and having a sort of pathway for our young lawyers is to get them in on some work experience, short periods of work experience, because you can often see that. But not only, when they're doing some work for you, but also you go out for lunch perhaps and see what they're like there. We will then normally, if that's worked, we'll then engage them on what is definitely a sort of trial period, of 2 or 3 months to sort of, we call it kicking the tyres. No kicking is involved. And then normally by the end of that process, albeit we have extended it for certain people, we'll have a pretty good idea as to whether that person is going to work. Because we've sort of given up on thinking from a CV or an interview, I can have found the right person. Because some of those people have interviewed so well with us over the years have been some of our biggest flops. Yes. And some of the people who've interviewed really poorly, even though they'd done some work experience with us and we knew they were good, but they're interviewed by different people, interviewed badly. And then have been some of our greatest successes when we just said, well, tell you what, they were good in the work experience. We're going to get them in. Let's see what they're like for 3 months. Yeah. And I think that's the process that we've adopted.
What I would also add to that is remember it's 2 ways. Mm-hmm. So Anson's are doing something right if you're having people come through and nurturing that talent and they come through for a long period of time. Because one of the other areas I spent a lot of time looking at is engagement. Okay. So engagement of staff. So if you can provide...
So these are the people who are already there?
Yeah. So once you've got them on board, are you fulfilling their needs? If you're fulfilling their needs, they're going to stay with you. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of work done on sort of engagement and psychology of staff and managers. What makes a great manager? No one really knows, and everyone's different. They're all good at what they do. But what every great manager does, every great leader does, is identify what their staff are good at and make sure they've got the space to be good at what they do. So I've one of my other areas that I do with everything is look at staff engagement. So that's always a great starting point.
And you do some surveys?
Yeah, and it's really simple. It's based around a Gallup survey of 12 questions, and that will tell you if you're engaged. And it's it's unbelievably powerful. So you start off with a simple questions. Do you know what's expected of you at work? Mm-hmm. And the amount of people who go, well, I don't really know because my job changes every day. They're going to be slightly disengaged. Have you got the right tools to do your job every day? If your laptop never works or your phone never works, or you're going to be disengaged. So if you haven't got the basics right, the foundations right, the rest of it is sort of doesn't really matter. So the top questions are does somebody care about my career? Has somebody spoken about my next career step? But if they can't get the foundations right, those bits are irrelevant.
What if you are finding low engagement?
Yep.
What do you know? I mean, I guess it depends on what the cause of the engagement is. But have you got a sort of ready remedy that you sort of?
It's different. It's different for everybody. If you've got a simple, if that first fundamental question answers poorly by your team, that they don't know what's expected of them work every day, you've got a problem. So the first thing you need to do is lay out to everybody what their job is. If they don't understand their job, they're going to be disillusioned. And there's some great stats out there in terms of an engaged employee, an engaged workforce. So it's like 20% more profitable.
I mean, I get that, and because when you're employing someone, you'll often ask them, where do you think you'll be, and judge them on that in 5 years' time. But then once you employ them, perhaps employers aren't having that process to check where they are at meeting those objectives and how is their career progressing.
Yeah, and I think that's very much for me the employer's role.
Yeah,
to nurture that. You've identified somebody as being having the right attitude and think they'll be good for the business, and then you ignore them or you give them to what is a poor manager. It just seems very daft to me.
You mentioned that your background in rugby union, and where I first came across you actually is at the side of the pitch playing against your team. It must have been a rare occasion when I was in Rouge Rugby Club's first team, and Kate was there, and you were, and who I knew from school, and you were living over in Market Drayton, and you went and captained Market Drayton Rugby Union team for about 2 or 3 years. Was
I am
it?
Still the longest serving captain. I did 5 years.
Oh. But were there any lessons you took from that then sort of went into your...
Don't listen to your brother. What I learned from that is never listen to what your brother says.
He forced you into it.
Yeah, so my career was I went to a decent rugby playing school, and then I went out to Germany for a while, and I came back and found what was, I thought, the best team in Shropshire at the time, which was Whitchurch.
Yes.
And I played right at the point where you had to be massive to play in the forwards.
Were you massive?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So you're not now really, but okay.
No. And it never worked. So I lost my love for the game. And my brother was playing at Market Drayton. He says, "Come and play for us. You'll be great. We've only got 3 players every week, so come and play for us." So and I did, and I regained my love for the sport.
And you were quickly their captain?
Yeah. Like I said, I did it for 5 years, and it was brutal, to be honest. When you're managing captaining in a small club, you are the guy that has to get the team organised. You need to make sure you've got they're all there.
And the referee.
Yeah, the referee. It's a pitch marked out. Have you got the posts on? You do everything, and it's.
So that's like running a small business with a lot of disengaged employees, right?
Yeah, it's the phone calls on a Saturday morning, and Kate will tell you about you go to bed on Friday night going, well, I've got 18 players and you need 15.
Yeah.
And then by 11 o'clock on a Saturday you've got 13. It's just a nightmare. So you're just phoning around, and it's just it was. But
were there some lessons beyond not doing it that you took into the rest of your business career?
Yeah, I think so. I think that definitely about sort of being organised and sort of how to nurture people. There's a few people who should we say weren't very good.
Yeah.
But you needed to keep them engaged because you'd need.
You need 15 players, right?
Yeah. On that day that you had 13, you'd need them. You'd have to phone Bob from wherever you think, and hope that he was out of bed and wasn't too hungover from the night before. But
make him feel valued and that he could have a role within the
team.
So
I think
it goes back to your employees, right?
100%, and yeah, that you make mistakes. You know, of course you do. You make mistakes along the way, and but I think I learned a lot about empathy, which is an overused word. But you know, putting yourself in that position, and
But go on. What do you mean empathy?
so everyone talks about empathy, and the best analogy I ever heard was if you're going to sympathise with somebody. So if I'm stuck in the bottom of a hole,
Yes.
and if you're going to offer me sympathy, you'll throw me a rope,
Okay.
okay? But you'll just throw the whole rope in, and you're okay down there, aren't you? If you offer empathy, you'll throw the rope and hold the other end and help them out.
Okay. Yeah, I like
So
that.
sympathy is just going, are you okay down there? Or how awful for you? Whereas empathy is actually understanding who they are and helping them get out.
Must be awful for you down that hole.
Yeah,
Trapped.
exactly, yeah.
Is that sympathy? But
Yeah.
empathy is feeling sorry
Well,
for them.
some people even say sympathy would even be jumping in the hole with them.
That doesn't sound to be like a
doesn't-
great
doesn't
solution to
sound
their
no.
whole problem.
Exactly. So being empathy is trying to understand what it is they're going through and helping them get out of it. So in a I suppose in a team mentality, it's like understanding what each person's strengths are and playing to those strengths. And there was one guy who was he was the fullback, and he had the best pair of hands I've ever seen on a rugby pitch.
By the best pair of hands, you're not
He could
saying he
catch
had a
anything.
tracked. Yes, that's
They-
what I was
they-
going to say.
they
You
were
weren't saying he got
massive.
very well manicured hands.
No, he was a farmer, so no. They were massive hands, and he could catch anything running at full tilt, by his ankles. He was an amazing player, but he's like, I don't want to get injured because I'm.
He's a farmer, and
because he's a
it's-
farmer.
yeah.
So we got to a point where we used to sort of force him to play, and in the end, I was like, look, when you're feeling engaged and want to play, let me know. But if you're not, I'd rather you weren't on the pitch, because everyone's worrying about you getting hurt, or if you don't go in wholeheartedly, you know yourself. If you don't go in full tilt that's when
We
you
won't.
get out.
No comment on that for those watching who are going to give me abuse in the comments. So we won't discuss my own rugby
Yeah.
playing career for certain.
No.
But I get it, and I think that's good. Emphasis, showing and demonstrating, which I guess is your
Yeah.
point, empathy with your staff, with your team that you've put together in your business, is important, because if you that is what is going to make them feel engaged, that you care and are invested in their future and their job progress and whether they're enjoying their job.
It is, but then you also have to think about fairness. You also have to think about sometimes it's right to chastise. If somebody isn't doing a good job, tell them they're not doing a good job. Different people react in different ways.
Yeah.
But it's understanding each person's characteristics, and that's a real challenge.
Some people need,
Yeah.
That
Some people need the rocket. Some people need an arm around the shoulder, and that might vary from day to day. So I see a lot of sort of small business owners who are, well, why isn't that person putting in as much effort as I do? Because it's your business. For them, it's just a job. And I mean that in the nicest possible way.
in the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Well, they're not going to feel the same. They're not going to be as engaged in you are on it, because if you're owning it and you're running it, then I guess you're.
It's your baby.
Yeah, but you're wanting them to feel invested in it, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess recognise that it's never going to quite be the same.
It's never quite the same. So there are a number of people I've worked with over the years. Actually, they get very frustrated when their team aren't as invested in what they're doing as they are. Well, they're sort of never going to be.
No.
And it's a wonderful skill that a very few people have, to take everybody on that journey and make them feel really invested in it.
Okay, so if people are interested in some of the stuff that you've said today and want to engage you and engage your services for some of the tools that you can introduce to them and some business coaching, how can they reach you? LinkedIn, I guess.
LinkedIn's always
Steve Downs, your face will
I'm
come
Steve
up.
Downs. My face will come up. I think I don't have glasses on there on the picture, but yeah, it's clearly me. You can get me on the Do you want mobile numbers to go out?
No, I don't.
No,
but
that's fine.
but people, I'll definitely put a link in the comments.
Yeah.
But they can reach out to you on LinkedIn, and the
LinkedIn.
website's coming together. Is it?
The website is getting there.
Okay.
Getting there. It's one of the things I always tell all my clients: make sure your website's up to date. But not very good at practicing what I preach.
A dentist with
Absolutely,
reporting, for sure. Well, Steve, thank you for coming on today. That's been really interesting, and really good luck with your new business venture, and particularly going to watch with keen interest if I start getting some. Lots of sort of LinkedIn messages from you,
If you
over
get
the next better messages,
better worded messages, yeah.
over the next few months. Well, it'll be when that launches in the next week or so. So I'm just going to be fascinating to watch your ongoing business journey. And
Thank you.
again, thank you for coming in and sharing with us today.
Thank you. Been a pleasure. Thanks, Martin.